On Overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
Reason and common sense, that seems to be disappearing at a pretty fast clip. However, it's possible that Chief Economist of the MB Fund and MB Super co-founder of Macro Business, Leith Van Onselen, can provide some common sense in this segment. Hello, Leith. How are you?
G'day, Mike. Good, thanks.
The New South Wales Productivity Commission's farcical report on Sydney's housing crisis. Yes, I read the notes from this, and we really do, I think, feel like we're living in an episode of Yes Minister, aren't we?
That's right, mate. Look. I agree with their sentiment. So basically, the New South Wales Productivity Commission released a report. I think it was on Tuesday, and they basically blamed high housing costs for driving young residents of Sydney out. So basically said families 30 to 40-year-olds families are basically leaving Sydney in droves, and they calculated that in the last census period, so between 2016 and 2021, nearly 40,000 Sydney residents between 30 and 40 years old left.
And we really need those, don't we? I mean, this is where the Productivity Commission comes in. They're the most productive. We really need them to stay, not get fed up and leave.
That's right, yeah. So the Productivity Commission said that the 30 to 40-year-olds are the most productive, and that this is basically creating a brain drain. Now, look, they are correct. I mean, we all know Sydney's housing costs are ridiculous. You've got a median house price of about $1.6 million. And you've obviously got the most expensive rents in the nation. They're going up, massively. The issue I have with the Productivity Commission is that they blame this on a lack of supply. The same old story, lack of supply. And what they fail to mention is that, Sydney's population has grown massively through mass immigration. So, for example, last financial year, which is the most recent, data we've got, Sydney's population grew by 174,000. And guess what net overseas migration was? 176,000. So it was all due to net overseas migration. And in fact, Mike, over the last decade, New South Wales's population grew by just under 800,000 in the decade to June 2023. So I should say, I said Sydney's population grew, that was New South Wales, but we all know it's pretty much in Sydney. So effectively you had, 176,000 last year for New South Wales, purely from net overseas migration, and the previous 10 years, nearly 800,000, which is 85% of New South Wales' population growth. So basically the New South Wales Productivity Commission's complained that young people are leaving. Well, guess why? Because you're importing plane loads upon plane loads of people into Sydney, and that's driving up housing costs because supply's not keeping up with demand. It can never keep up with that level of demand. So residents are leaving. Surprise, surprise. So, the thing that annoys me about it is this always happens with these government departments and erroneous think tanks and that sort of thing, is they always say, it's a supply issue. We're not building enough houses, but they never look at the demand side. They never ask the question, why are we growing the population like a lab experiment through mass immigration, which is creating all these problems from housing to infrastructure. It's going to create water shortages in the future. All these sorts of things. We're forcing people to now live in high-rise shoebox apartments when they used to be able to live in a house. Congestion is absolutely bananas. Livability's gone down. It's the same stuff I talk about nearly every week. But here we have yet another government department that's supposed to be full of economic experts trying to say it's a supply issue. And their solution, guess what? We need to upzone everything, relax planning, and have apartments built everywhere. That's their genius solution. And guess what? We did that in Sydney, in the latter half of last decade. Sydney had a massive apartment boom, built, record numbers of apartments. And guess what? Half of them turned out to be faulty, according to the New South Wales government, and we're paying the price.
That's another fascinating aspect of life in Sydney, isn't it? But doesn't that go back to the idea that if you want somebody to check out your high-rise, whatever it is, you can call up a mate?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, it's not like it is in the US, is it? In the US, I believe, if you need a building inspected, first cab off the rank. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so basically, it's basically deregulated. So effectively, you just get someone who, you pay them to approve it and they approve it. So it's all, look, the whole thing's a farce. And the New South Wales Building Commissioner came out with a report about a month ago, said that 56% of apartments that were built between, I think, 2016 and 2020-21 had serious defects.
Yeah.
So the New South Wales Productivity Commission's genius solution is, instead of curbing immigration and lowering it to sensible, sustainable levels, is, I don't know, we'll just keep the pedal on the metal. We'll fire hose in, astronomical numbers of people, and we'll just put them in apartments. When that failed so miserably last decade with faulty apartments left, right and centre.
And also, I mean, I know you've alluded to this in this conversation, but yes, okay, build apartments, that'd be, well, maybe a solution in the eye of these bureaucrats. But what about the roads and the hospitals and the schools and, as you say, the water supply? All of that stuff, it's really just not being addressed, is it? It's some kind of, hey, what's that in the corner of the room? No, it can't be an elephant. Let's just cross our fingers and hope that somehow or other this fixes itself. Is that the idea?
Pretty much. I mean, we all laugh at China. They build it first and they hope that people will then come.
Yeah.
In Australia, we just pretend to worry about the consequences later.
Indeed.
So we never build enough housing. We never build enough infrastructure. And the solutions, always to present this as a supply issue when it's a demand issue, because for some stupid reason, the federal government in the mid-2000s decided to more than double the migration intake, and it's been ratcheted up ever since. And this is why Sydney's population has grown from about 3.8 million to about 5.2 million currently just this century. It's crazy. It's massive growth.
Indeed it is. It was interesting to see the change in position by previous Premier of the great state of New South Wales, Dominic Perrottet.
Yeah, it was. Well, this was a quite interesting one. And look, hats off to him for at least mentioning the elephant in the room. But Australian politicians, Mike, they have this tendency, as soon as they leave office, they become honest and they start actually telling the truth. And we see it over and over again. And, listeners might recall that in late 2021, when Dominic Perrottet took over as New South Wales Premier, he said that Australia needed a quote, explosive surge of 2 million migrants over 5 years to boost the economy, as we recover out of COVID. And he basically wanted to double in the pre-COVID immigration levels for 5 years. Well, guess what? The Albanese government delivered that for 1 year, and it's created a hell of a lot of problems. And Dominic Perrottet fronted a property council meeting last week, and he said he basically did a 180-degree flip. He looked at the situation. He went, "Oh my God, it didn't really work out too well, did it?" And he's calling the immigration program a quote Ponzi scheme and quote lazy economics. And he said that it's also unfair on state governments because the federal governments collect all the benefits through company taxes, personal income taxes, etc., whereas the costs are lumped on the state governments who are left, having to build the roads, the infrastructure, the water supplies, all the stuff that goes around it, all the government services, and they only collect a small fraction of the nation's taxes. So therefore, they're bearing the cost and they don't get the benefits, whereas the federal government gets the benefits and don't bear the costs. And he's finally had his Damascus moment after after lobbying the federal government for huge immigration when he became Premier. Now he's not the Premier. He's now done a 180-degree flip and is calling it, again, a Ponzi scheme and lazy economics, which is 100% right.
Indeed it is. Well, I've been saying that for quite a while, but then I don't go to the meetings. I just heckle from the cheap seats.
That's right, mate. Well, I think we all do. I mean, I've been heckling for 10 years and, being called all sorts of names as a result. But, mate, it's common sense. Look, almost anyone who's lived in Sydney for the last 20 years has seen the degradation of their quality of life. Just through huge population growth, housing crisis, more congestion, all this sort of thing. It's basically eroded the quality of life. And the problem is now it's starting to fly up to places like Brisbane because as the New South Wales Productivity Commission said, we've got heaps of outward migration from the immigration hotspots of Sydney and Melbourne towards Brisbane because residents in these two cities get sick and tired of the congestion, sick and tired of the degradation of living standards. So they go and seek greener pastures in places like Brisbane and southeast Queensland. And now their population is growing rapidly, not because of net overseas migration, but mainly because of internal migration from Sydney and Melbourne up there. And now they're suffering the consequences. So, look, the whole thing is just basically a Ponzi scheme. And effectively what we need is for the federal government to, curb immigration back to pre-2005 levels of around 100,000 a year, which was the average between, the Second World War, the end of the Second World War and 2005 before our federal government, in all its infinite wisdom, decided to more than double the immigration intake.
few weeks ago, and she was a very qualified lady, lawyer and engineer. And it's her role in life, in her career, to deal with the kind of issues we're talking about. And she said to me, I don't see why Australia has to go through this apparent Asianisation, which was interesting coming from her because she was Asian and born in one of the huge Asian cities. Do you think that's what we're doing? Are we going through an Asianisation?
Well, certainly. I mean, just factually, most of our immigration now comes from India and China. So just based on those statistics, yes, we are. But I'm more concerned about the numbers. Like the numbers are just off the charts, and it's just too high for our economies, for the economy to cope, the infrastructure to cope, the environment to cope, all that sort of thing. I don't particularly care where people come from, but as long as they're productive and as long as they're law abiding and all that kind of thing, and preferably high skilled and highly paid, which would be better. That's pretty much why I'd like to see the immigration system that basically has similar level of family migration as we've got now, but the rest of it cut back enormously and focus purely on very highly paid and very highly skilled people.
I think we have
a better quality system.
I think we have come to recognise, that some of the old slurs that might be pointed at someone who said we need lower levels of immigration, that's not happening, at least not to the degree. It is all about the numbers, but I just thought in this particular lady's case, doing what she does, being from where she is, it was kind of an interesting observation that, in fact, those people that you're talking about there, they come here for a particular way of life, which it seems to me is fading away.
Well, yeah, that is interesting because the Australian Population Research Institute, which was run out of, I think, Monash University, they do an annual report on voters' attitudes to immigration. And basically what it shows year after year is that about 2/3 of Australians oppose, the sort of pre-COVID levels of immigration, let alone what we've got now, which is double that. And interestingly, recent migrants heavily oppose the immigration as well. And you can see why. I mean, look, arguably the recent migrants are impacted, arguably even more by high immigration than the incumbent residents because they tend to not own property yet. And obviously, and they tend to live in places that are being crush loaded, like Western Sydney or Western Melbourne, which are basically the dumping grounds. And so they're putting up with the congestion. They've got lack of amenities, so lack of healthcare, lack of hospitals, lack of schools, all this sort of thing. So they're suffering themselves. So they come here in the hope for a better life.
Yep.
And then 5 years down the track, they're going, geez, this place has become so much worse than when I moved here.
Well,
and so I think that's probably where that woman's coming from. It's just basically a degradation of quality of life, and she's probably thinking, why is Australia doing this? Like,
yes,
how does this benefit the existing residents or the residents that are already here?
Indeed, I believe that is what she's thinking. Leith, appreciate your time and comments as always. Thank you for coming on the program.
Cheers, Mike. Speak to you next time.
Leith Van Onselen, Chief Economist at the MB Fund and MB Super co-founder of Macro Business.